Here we go, everybody. It is Simon from The Natural Edge.
Right, I'm just going to get this screen share up, which sometimes takes a couple of seconds. And what I'm going to do is stop that, move that off. Okay, hopefully now you're all seeing just a screen that says how to eliminate stress and build resilience.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Right, okay, let's delve into it. So this will be a broad oversight due to the time that we've got, but it will provide you with a framework that you need to have in place to keep stress at bay and be more resilient. Now, to explain why stress has such a negative impact on us, I'm going to take you through a short story about my own battle with it, which means rewinding a few years to 2014. So at that time, I was serving in UK Special Forces, and although it was very demanding, I was also very happy. But at the same time, I was beginning to look towards the future. I was in a great relationship at the time, and I was getting to the point where I felt as if I'd accomplished all the things that I wanted to in the military. So I was beginning to think that it was time for a new challenge. The following year, in July 2015, I took the plunge and left UK Special Forces. And by September, I was working in London in a consultancy doing project management in the construction industry, basically because I didn't have an exact plan of what I wanted to do, and this seemed like a good opportunity. But that's when things started to go wrong. And why a few months later, I was sitting on my own in the office, looking and feeling knackered. It was 7 a.m. and I'd come in early again to try and get ahead of the curve. But for the previous hour, I'd been sat there wondering how the hell I'd ended up feeling so low. I felt zombified, almost detached from reality, which I guess was my coping mechanism. My head was full of racing thoughts of everything that needed to get done, but I felt like I had no idea where to start and no enthusiasm or energy to do any of it. And I couldn't figure out how I'd even got to this place, let alone how to get out of it. It's like being trapped. You know you have to do something, but you're frozen with frustration and confusion of what the right move is. And it was only with retrospect that I understood it was stress, but I didn't even realize it at the time, which I suppose is exactly why they call it the silent assassin, because it creeps into your life, and once it gets a hold, it spreads its tentacles out to affect everything that you do. And I'm sure you've all had unpleasant feelings caused by stress, when you have that fear of things to come, worrying about bills or problems with your relationship, while at other times your head is so full of racing thoughts it becomes overwhelming. Everything feels busy, but nothing gets done. And it doesn't take long before you start to have moments where it's like you're stuck in the cycle that feels impossible to break free from. You want to escape and break free, but every time you try, it tightens its grip and paralyzes you. And here's the thing, even though we can feel like we're the only ones not coping, it's just not true. The numbers are clear. It's affecting more and more people, with stress and stress-related disorders becoming the most common mental health issues we face in modern times. And in fact, it's worth briefly mentioning what stress actually is. Stress is a response that basically advises you on what to do. It's a reaction where your brain decides whether or not there is a threat, and if there is, it triggers a fight or flight reaction to make sure we are best able to respond to that threat. And in small doses, this is a brilliant evolutionary system, and it works very well. This response kept our ancestors safe from dangerous animals or unrelenting conditions. And it's what is known as acute stress, meaning that it's short and sharp. And in itself, it doesn't take a heavy toll if we find ways to relax quickly. Once the stressor has been dealt with, we need to return our body to normal to be healthy and happy. And this still serves us today if we feel like danger is close by and we switch into survival mode. The problem is that in comparison to evolution, modern society has come about very quickly, and the system that has served us so well is now malfunctioning. Today, we have a frustrating daily commute, financial strain, relationship disagreements, or caring for a sick loved one. These are all situations that can trigger the stress response and then keep it going for weeks, months, or even years at a time. And that is where things start to really go wrong. In today's busy world, we are prone to perceiving a low level of threat in everyday situations over a prolonged period of time, leading to a long-term stress response that is extremely hard on the body. And a good way to think about it is like this. Your body is like a small medieval town. In normal times, the population tends the fields, maintains the buildings, looks after the animals, and enjoys life. If the barbarians approach, a scout rings the bell and half the population stop what they are doing and run to the walls to defend the town. The barbarians are fought off and the villagers return to their tasks to keep the town running. That is acute stress, short, sharp periods of alertness and necessary action only when required. But if the scout believes the barbarians are always about to burst out of the nearby woods and constantly rings the warning bell, it means that half the population are always on the walls, ready for an attack that never comes. Meanwhile, the grain is rotting in the fields, the unmaintained roofs of the buildings are leaking, the town is generally falling into disarray, and no one has any time to enjoy life. That is chronic stress, continuous and unnecessary pressure that causes severe damage. And this damage reveals itself in many ways, like weakening our immune system. It's no coincidence that you often come down with something at the worst times, like when you have a particularly busy period at work or a pressing deadline. And that's because chronic stress does a real number on your immune system, making you more likely to get sick. Digestive health is also closely linked to stress levels, giving unpleasant side effects like indigestion, IBS, cramps, diarrhea, constipation, and loss of appetite. And when your body is constantly in fight or flight mode, it produces excess cortisol, which can leave you battling a host of aches and pains, including back and neck pain. If you've ever been for a massage, I can almost guarantee that the masseuse has made a comment about feeling stress built up somewhere in your body. This can also lead to tension headaches and migraines. For women, sudden changes in your cycle can indicate that you're enduring too much stress. And strange dreams can be a warning sign as your brain subconsciously works through stress you either don't know is there or are simply trying to ignore. Making decisions also becomes a challenge. It can be easy to think of not being able to make small decisions as just one of those things, but it really isn't. Stress has a really negative impact on how clearly we think and act. And that's the thing with all of this stuff. We don't even realize that they're linked to stress. We just assume that they are all independent problems. But your body doesn't work like that. Every single part of your body affects to a greater or lesser degree pretty much every other part. When we get sick or things aren't right, the symptoms might be problems sleeping, a gut disorder, issues with our skin, or some other complaint. But they are not the cause. They are just signals that the body is out of balance and that something or many things are going wrong elsewhere. But once you start joining the dots, you begin to see how often we suffer and experience problems when chronic stress starts wrapping its tentacles around us. I personally experienced this and the stark difference between the two sides of the stress coin. During my service in the military, I felt completely on top of my game and in control. My tours in Afghan, for example, were punctuated with short bouts of acute stress that were essential to survival. But periods in between this, it was actually very stress-free because operational tours can be like being in a bubble. You have no bills to worry about, no busy commute, no day-to-day problems that can feel like a grind. And you have a brilliant social environment because you are surrounded by good mates the whole time. I basically had zero chronic stress and it allowed me to function at a very high level. But when I started my job in the city, that all changed. The whole experience was a stark change to my previous life, getting onto a rammed tube into the city each morning and trying to figure out costings and spreadsheets. Because the problem in our always on culture, being in a perpetual state of stress can start to feel normal. As our schedules get busier and busier, we adjust to a more hectic lifestyle without even realizing that we seriously need to take action. It's a bit like the fishbowl effect. Just as the fish has no idea that it's in a tank, the way we feel on a daily basis becomes our own new normal. We don't even realize how much better we could be feeling. And this also means we don't fully appreciate just how damaging this constant day in, day out stress can be. But I really started to notice it. When you're suffering from stress, it doesn't take much to actually lose your cool, losing your temper when someone cuts you up, snapping at your partner or your kids for nothing in particular because you're feeling rushed or busy, or even getting upset or taking offense at the smallest of things. And it's really easy to convince yourself that this is just how life is, how everyone is. And unfortunately, the people who get the brunt of these negative emotions are always those closest to you. I started getting really short with my girlfriend, picking fights for no reason, glazing over when she'd tell me a story, or looking at my phone instead of connecting with her. I also found that I wasn't taking part in as many social activities as I used to, because I always felt like there was too much to do, and I just kind of lost interest in making the effort to meet up with people. Something else that happened was my focus was nowhere near as clear as it usually was, and I'd forget little things like the keys or water bottle more easily, and small tasks like doing the laundry or food shopping seemed to take so much more effort. So a big sign you're stressed is that even easy tasks and simple admin chores feel difficult to manage. My cravings for eating junk also went up, which for me meant devouring packets of Oreos. And this is also linked to our evolution. When we were hunter-gatherers, harsh conditions forced us to eat as much as possible when food was available in order to store up for lean times. And that compulsion lives on inside us and comes out when we're stressed. The scary thing is that when we are stressed, we can consume up to 40% more food than normal. And stress hormones also influence the type of food we crave. Basically, those with high fat and sugar content, so all the processed junk that is easy to gorge on. Oh, for some reason, guys, I don't know whether it's someone's, excuse me for 1 second. I think someone is waiting to get in and it's not letting me now move the slides on. I'm just going to have to pause for a second and let this person in, and then we'll carry on. Okay. Okay, we should be back on now. Okay, let's go from there. And my desire to train plummeted. It's the most inconsistent I've ever been with my training. But looking back, here's the scary thing. I have loved sport and exercise since I was a kid, and it's a core part of my identity. So for me, someone who has a natural love of training, to go down a path of eating a crap diet and losing any interest in training, that really showed me just how powerful the negative effect of stress is and how much it throws your body and mental state out of balance. And it made me realize, no wonder there are so many people struggling with things like diet and exercise. If you don't have a natural love of that stuff and you've got chronic stress bubbling away under the surface, which most people have, then it's no wonder that losing weight or getting fit feels like this massive battle, because you're fighting an incredibly powerful force. Something else that I hadn't really spoken about is the effect it had on my sex life with my girlfriend, or really lack of, because my sex drive almost disappeared. And this is because chronic stress affects the concentration of all sex hormones, because the body produces stress hormones such as cortisol at the expense of sex hormones like testosterone. Apologies, guys. Someone else is trying to get in and it is messing up the it means, unless I just try another keyboard. No, it's not going to let me do it. I'm just going to have to quickly do the same again. Okay. And the cold hard reality is that many of us accept that a lot of these things to some degree or another are just how life is. I definitely got into that mindset. To be honest, it wasn't even a case of accepting it. It just crept up slowly, so that before I knew it, I was that fish in the bowl. And the wake-up call for me came in two forms. The first was that slap in the face we all need from time to time. There was an email doing the rounds at work with one of those life calendars. You stick your date of birth in and it shows you how many days you have left based on average life expectancy. And there it was in black and white, or red and green in this case. Nearly half my time was done, and was this it? I'd already peaked with my time in the military, and now it was just a decline of energy with each day being a fight. It's a terrifying thought when you sit down and really appreciate how short the time is we have left. But it was sitting in the office on my own, feeling trapped and frustrated, that was the final straw. That night, I really stepped back and took stock of the situation. Not 6 months ago, I'd been working on my own in Kabul, running an Afghan arrest force. in what on paper should have been far more stressful as a job. And yet I was suffering more getting onto the tube into work each day. Admittedly, a lot of change, but regardless of the circumstances, there was no reason to feel like this. And that's when I started making changes, because I wasn't going to let that current reality define the rest of my life. And here's the thing, we can take simple actions that make a big difference to our stress response. When you experience a stressful event, your brain communicates with the rest of the body through the autonomic nervous system. This has two components, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system functions like a gas pedal in a car. It triggers the fight or flight response, providing the body with a burst of hormones which trigger energy release so that it can respond to perceived dangers. The parasympathetic nervous system acts like a brake. It promotes the rest and digest response that calms the body down after the danger has passed. Something else is, I don't know, someone else has just popped up, guys. Apologies. Right, there's no one else there. There should be no reason why that's doing that. But if your brain continues to perceive something as dangerous, the hypothalamus activates the second component of the stress response system, known as the HPA axis, and the adrenal glands will release cortisol to keep the body revved up. Chronic low-level stress, traffic jams, work pressure, family difficulties, all of this keeps your body in a state of stress that is incredibly damaging. But what I learned is that there are certain activities that anyone can do which will counteract this. Over a period of research and self-experimentation, and with constant refinement over the last few years, I've come up with a system that anybody can put in place. I call it Halo for no other reason than to hopefully make it more memorable by linking it to a method of insertion used by Special Forces. In a typical Halo exercise, which stands for high altitude, low opening, you will jump from the aircraft, free fall for a period of time at terminal velocity, and open your parachute at low altitude. The combination of high downward speed, minimal forward airspeed reduces the amount of time a parachute might be visible to ground observers. Now, the very first important point to understand as to why this system is effective is because it works on both the physiological and psychological elements that you need in place to be truly resilient. So let's start with the H, which stands for health first. When you jump out of the plane, it is your responsibility to get yourself to the designated RV landing point on the ground. This can take considerable effort and concentration, especially when done at night and weighed down with kit. If you mess this up, if you miscalculate your landing and injure yourself, you are now combat ineffective and a burden to your team. For each of us, our personal physical and mental health dictates performance in every single aspect of our lives, and it's our own responsibility to manage it. It affects how susceptible to illness and injury we are, our energy and focus in the jobs we do, our mood when we interact with our friends, our partners, our kids, and it directly correlates with your level of resilience. What makes us healthy also makes us resilient, and in return, being resilient improves our health. Now, traditionally, the first things that we think of when it comes to health are diet and exercise, and these absolutely do play a big role in how we feel, but these can often seem like big steps for people. And if you are suffering any degree of chronic stress, your body might be functioning so badly that it can be a huge battle to do the things we know will help us in the long run. Because as I referenced earlier, stress does a really great job of throwing your hormones out of whack, which puts you in a state where you feel physically low on energy and mentally low on motivation and lacking focus and clarity. However, there are some easier actions which you can put in place which will act like a gateway to make it easier for further positive action. This comment was by a member of our coaching group, and the only reason I include this in this talk is because it's easy to assume that the things I'm going to cover only work for other people, people who perhaps have something that you don't. But I can assure you that is not the case. We coach people from every walk of life, and a lot of them start off in a really bad place. As Susie put here, where I've struggled previously with being consistent with exercise, particularly since lockdown in March, I've managed to do a home workout pretty much every day this week and several walks because I've been feeling so energized and in a good daily routine. And this is a pattern we have seen repeated time and again. Once you start upregulating the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the first action to prioritize and optimize is your sleep, because it is the bedrock your health sits on and is the single biggest performance enhancer we have access to. And this quote by Casey Smith is my favorite for summing up how important it is. You'll notice that I've changed the word athlete to anyone because this really does apply to everyone. If you told anyone you had a treatment that would reduce the chemicals associated with stress, that would naturally increase human growth hormone, that enhances recovery rate, that improves performance, they would all do it. Sleep does all of those things. If you're worrying about whether carbs are bad or whether blueberries are a superfood or what exercise will get you the fittest, but you are doing nothing to optimize your sleep, you are going to find it very, very hard to achieve true health. And you can do this by taking some simple steps in 3 areas, the 3 Ds of sleep: daylight, darkness, and discipline. First up, we have daylight and darkness. We all have an internal clock, which is known as a circadian rhythm. Bright light exposure during the day and darkness at night continuously set this clock and keep it in line with the natural cycle of night and day. Almost every type of cell in the body is sensitive to your circadian rhythm, which means it affects all systems in your body from digestion to alertness. And I can't emphasize how important this is. Nothing in your body will work optimally when your circadian rhythm is out of sync. The 2 simple actions you can take is to get exposure to daylight as soon as possible upon waking and sleep in a dark environment at night. Your room should have dark curtains or ideally blackout blinds, and there should be no electronic devices in the room. And in the lead up to sleep, make sure your phone and other screens are put away at least an hour before going to bed. The last D is discipline, and by that I'm talking about routine. As Michael Grander, director of the Sleep and Health Research Program at the University of Arizona, points out, sleep is a part of a larger system of biological rhythms that regulate everything from brain function to muscle repair. The more variable your sleep schedule, the more these systems are not working optimally together. Basically, a fluctuating sleep pattern screws up our body clock and its hormone signaling, which in turn screws us up too. Consistency is the cornerstone of a healthy sleep routine. It reinforces your body's sleep regulation systems, strengthening your body's circadian rhythms, helping to keep your sleep clock synchronized. And ideally, you'll keep this roughly the same 7 days a week. A sleep schedule that varies significantly between weekdays and weekends sends mixed messages to those important sleep systems. Slight changes to your sleep-wake schedule aren't likely to pose problems, but dramatic shifts should be avoided. So in summary, aim for a consistent sleep-wake cycle that gives you a minimum of 7 hours sleep and avoid big changes at the weekends. So the simple wins are create a stable sleep-wake cycle, get a minimum of 7 hours, and avoid those big changes. Okay, the next action I want to cover outside of diet and exercise is a really simple practice that I learned a couple of years previously from our American counterparts, the Navy SEALs, whilst over in California. They used a deep breathing technique to remain calm and focus clearly to avoid reactionary thinking or worse, panic. Now, breathing is something we all do automatically, but the way in which we breathe has a massive impact on our mind and body, and I cannot overstate that. Breathing is regulated by the autonomic nervous system and is the easiest and most instrumental part of it to control and navigate. The way you breathe strongly affects the chemical and physiological activities in your body. In short, it's incredibly powerful. Yet many of us never harness the power of proper breathing to alleviate stress and maintain good health. A relaxed breath originates in the belly, and the optimal rate is 6 to 10 breaths per minute. However, most people breathe from their chest 16 to 20 times per minute, and it's this shallow breath that keeps us feeling continuously on edge. Think about times when you felt stressed, when the body involuntarily becomes tense, your chest tightens, and your breathing becomes very rapid and shallow. Well, the chances are that your daily breathing is not far off this, not so shallow that you consciously notice, but enough to be significantly affecting your stress response. A simple exercise you can start with is box breathing. Before you get started, make sure that you're seated in an upright, comfortable chair with your feet flat on the floor, and try to be in a stress-free, quiet environment where you can focus on your breathing. Keep your hands relaxed in your lap, focus on your posture, and sit up straight because it will help you take deep breaths. When you're ready, start with a slow exhale through your mouth, getting all the oxygen out of your lungs. Focus on this intention and be conscious of what you're doing. Then inhale slowly and deeply through your nose to the count of 4. Imagine filling your abdomen first and then your chest. Hold your breath for another slow count of 4. Exhale through your mouth for the same slow count of 4, expelling the air from your lungs and abdomen. Then hold for another count of 4 and repeat for a total of 4 rounds. The slower and deeper you breathe, the better you'll feel. This is because deep diaphragmatic breathing strikes the ideal balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood, triggering various internal mechanisms that promote relaxation. When I added in a really simple breathing practice, it made a huge difference. And that was simply 5 to 10 minutes each day. And it didn't take long before my unconscious breathing throughout the rest of the day was deeper and slower. Now, the next action may seem a bit crazy at first glance, and I completely get that, but bear with me here. I remembered reading an article about Wim Hof and the impact cold has on our stress response. So I searched out any material I could find and discovered the world of cold water immersion. Now, I suspect everyone here has felt the shock of cold water before. The freezing temperature creates a stress reaction in the body, causing the fight or flight mechanism to kick in. So if you want to reduce stress, you might wonder why this is a good thing. Well, if you repeat this process of cold water immersion, it gradually reduces the severity of the initial stress reaction. But the real magic is that the reduction in the stress response applies in other stressful situations, not just on exposure to cold water. Your reaction to stress in daily life is also reduced. And this isn't just anecdotal. Science is proving the theory that repeated short bouts of cold exposure significantly reduces the adrenaline-driven sympathetic response to a different stressor and increases the parasympathetic activity that calms the body down. In other words, our natural adaptations to cope with the stress of cold water immersion lead to less reaction to other unrelated stressors, as well as an ability to calm down faster too. And this cross-adaptation effect lasts for months. Cold water immersion itself has been around for a couple of millennia in various cultures, and thanks to a series of groundbreaking studies, the science community are getting really excited. For a start, you can enhance lymphatic circulation through the network of vessels that run throughout the body, clearing out waste, bacteria, and microbes from your cells. You can improve cardiovascular circulation, which is one of the most critical components to our overall health and well-being. And critically, it boosts mood because as cold water hits the body, the electrical impulses sent to your brain jolt your system to increase alertness, clarity, and energy levels. Plus, you'll build a stronger immune system. The shock of cold water in the bloodstream stimulates leukocytes, which means regular cold water exposure can help your resistance to common illnesses like colds and the flu. And then there is the resilience building side of things. Our modern worlds are geared to make us physically comfortable. We are rarely out of our comfort zones unless we choose to be. And when we are stressed or anxious, we try to control our fears by restricting our world, which ironically makes us more fearful as we don't get the chance to learn that we can in fact cope. In contrast, overcoming and managing the shock of cold water immersion reconnects us with feelings of self-control and of the trust that we can cope. The process of committing to stay in cold water increases your mental strength by asserting control over your body and mind. And by becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, you increase your resilience in other areas. Plus, it requires you to learn to relax in the presence of extreme stress, which is a most valuable life skill for day-to-day living. And you don't need to head out to streams or ice holes. All you need is a shower. The easiest way to achieve this is by having a warm shower for however long you like. Then at some point, turn the shower to its coldest setting and stand under it for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and then finish with the shower with warm water. And I just want to reiterate the point that we have hundreds of people no different from you in our coaching groups doing this and seeing a huge change in their stress response, their energy levels, and their mindset. Okay, so that is health first. And as I said, if there was more time, I could really delve into this further. But if you did just the things I've spoken about, you will see a dramatic change. No ifs or buts, it works. They are simple actions that will directly influence your autonomic nervous system. To delve into it further, I highly recommend the books Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, What Doesn't Kill Us by Scott Carney. And although we haven't covered it, in terms of nutrition, my top recommendation is to read The Diet Myth and focus on your gut health. And now we'll move on to the psychological side of things and mindset and how you build resilience, which is the ability to manage uncertainty, resist and overcome fear, while transcending obstacles that may appear to be preventing you from succeeding. Studies on resilience began at the University of Chicago in the late 1970s with Suzanne Cabas's foundational paper entitled Stressful Life Events. And that's where I started my own research and continued it with books like Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maltz. But Cabas's model is the best framework I've found because it breaks it down into 3 distinct areas you must work on. First up, we have to accept challenges. In this context, Cabasa found that resilient people view a difficulty as a challenge, not as a paralyzing event. They look at their failures and mistakes as lessons to be learned from and as opportunities for growth. They don't view them as a negative reflection on their abilities or their self-worth. In fact, that is pretty much what my military career was, a series of chances to overcome challenges. From the outside, it can seem that Special Forces is the smooth operating machine where you swoop in, do the job and sneak out. But more often than not, it's barely held together with black masking tape, and I do mean that literally on occasions. What can go wrong will go wrong, but it's the mindset towards the difficulty you face that makes the difference. No cuff too tough is a phrase you'll often hear, which means that even when you don't have the right tools or skills for the job, you'll make it work somehow. And importantly, guys aren't afraid to fail. They'll give anything a go. And if it doesn't work the first, second, or even 10th time, fine. It just means the 11th is even more likely to succeed. This picture is from one of the long-range patrols we were conducting in Afghan in 2011, and things would go wrong on a daily basis, particularly with the vehicles. But at no point does anyone say, right, fellas, everyone's pretty tired, it's not going as planned, let's head home. And life should be no different, because it's never going to be a smooth ride. Things will always go wrong. But if you perceive, and the crux of this really is your own perception, these obstacles as pass or fail events, rather than a challenge to be worked at, then life is going to feel like a constant battle for you. And at the root of this is the idea of fixed and growth mindsets. Carol Dweck, an eminent professor of psychology at Harvard University, published the seminal work on this in her book, Mindset: How You Can Fulfill Your Potential. She argues that our beliefs, even the ones that we are unaware of, strongly affect what we want and whether we succeed in getting it. In a fixed mindset, you believe that your qualities are carved in stone, which means challenging events present a problem, because rather than seeing them as an opportunity for development, a fixed mindset person will see it as a pass or fail test, something they can either do or not do. Whereas in a growth mindset, You believe that your basic qualities can be cultivated through effort. Obviously, we know that not everyone can be anything, but a person's true potential is unknown. Challenge and difficulty are a part of life, from the small daily upsets like breaking a glass or missing a bus, to the big events like traumatic injury or death. When you have a fixed mindset, each time something goes wrong or you don't do as well as you would have liked, you will end up assigning blame, which means you either blame yourself for not being good enough, or you blame external factors for any negative outcome. Whenever you try to pass the blame onto some person or circumstance in your life, you give up your power, because it's a mindset where you tell yourself other people or other events derailed your plans and that you're incapable of overcoming these things. The failures in your life aren't your fault. But if it's not your fault, then that means you're telling your subconscious that you are not responsible for your own life. Whereas when you have a growth mindset, you understand that just because something didn't go according to plan, it's simply a learning experience. And central to this is taking ownership of the things that happen to you. The reason that fixed mindset thinkers struggle with this is because they don't like failure, because failure to them is a direct reflection of their self-worth. To them, not doing well at something very quickly is a sign to give up, and therefore they do not embrace challenges. In fact, they avoid them. And clearly that is the opposite of resilience. The ultimate responsibility is taking charge of your own life. Other people and circumstances cannot keep you from your goals unless you let them. We suddenly find our power, and a sense of relief occurs deciding not to blame ourselves or others. Now, this, of course, it doesn't mean that you won't feel sad or disappointed about things that don't go the way that you'd like them to. But by refusing to blame others, you gain a huge sense of freedom. You're no longer a victim, no longer unworthy, and no longer stuck. Next up, we have locate control. And here, Cabasa advises, spend your time and energy focusing on situations and events that you have control over. Putting your efforts where they can have the most impact will increase feelings of empowerment and confidence. Spending time worrying about uncontrollable events leads to a feeling of being lost and powerless to take action. When you're under canopy parachuting and tracking towards your landing point, which can be up to 10 kilometers away, you cannot control what the wind is doing, and it's futile to try. All you can do is focus on your skills with the canopy control to give you the best chance of hitting the mark. But you cannot control that outcome. You can only influence it. As I said before, what can go wrong will go wrong. They say that no plan survives first contact, i.e., when the first shots are fired, you have to be flexible and adapt to the situation however it evolves. In battle, you cannot control what the enemy will do. You cannot control weapon malfunctions or problems with comms. And I can honestly say that there wasn't a single job where radios didn't fail. All you can control is you and your reaction to what is happening, and then choose the course of action that gives you the best chance of success, sometimes in the space of a few seconds. But committing to a decision, even if it's the wrong one, is better than indecision. Worrying about things that are out of your control is probably one of the biggest factors that contributes to chronic stress. How often have you spoken about any of the endless list of factors outside of your control? The weather, the economy, circumstances, disasters, other people's actions, and attached a wish or desire to them. I wish this would happen, or I want that to occur. As Ryan Holiday noted in The Obstacle is the Way, in our own lives, how many problems come from applying judgments to things we don't control, as though there were a way they were supposed to be? How often do we see what we think is there or should be there instead of what is actually there? A good mental model for this is CIA. Imagine, if you will, that you have 3 levels when it comes to how you assign your efforts. The sphere within your control, the sphere outside your immediate control, but which you can influence, and everything else which is outside of your influence and must be accepted. So when you size up a situation, ask yourself, what can you control? What can you influence? And what must you accept? And what, in actual fact, is within your control? Broadly speaking, it is these 5 areas: your attitude, your emotions, your perspective, your decisions, and your determination. And again, you could go into great depth with each of these, but having a growth mindset ties directly into many of them. So if you want to start somewhere, then reading Carol Dweck's book on mindset is a really good place. And finally, we have own yourself. And that is all to do with commitment. For true resilience, you must be committed to your life and your goals and have a compelling reason to get out of bed in the morning. Commitment isn't just restricted to your work. Commit to your relationships, your friendships, and the causes you care about. The moments before you jump out of the plane are always worse than the jump itself. But once you take that step off the tailgate, it's very freeing because you're committed. Now you just focus on what you need to do to achieve your objective. All other worries are gone. Selection for Special Forces is not an easy process. This picture was taken at the end of the jungle phase. Now, because it's the part that most people know about, there is a perception that the hills phase, navigating around Wales with heavy packs, is what selection is. But to be honest, that's just an initial culling phase to get rid of anyone totally unsuitable. Go through that just to get your plane ticket for the jungle. And that is where selection really begins. 2 weeks build up and then 4 weeks fully tactical in the trees. It's an incredibly taxing experience. And I think it probably took me, in all honesty, 1 to 2 years to feel physically back on track afterwards, because it has such a negative effect on your adrenal system. And if you go on selection with any doubt at all in your mind about being there, even 1%, you won't make it. You have to know 100% that this is the life you want and that you will go through whatever it takes to make that a reality. Because your level of resilience will at some point come down to how much something means to you. When you are committed to something, it makes bearing any hardships that you encounter so much easier to deal with. Working out who you truly are and what makes you happy, and then placing your environment and actions in line with this, makes a huge difference to your levels of resilience, stress, and happiness. The hard part of all of this is working out what is right for you in the first place. What is your reason for getting up in the morning? What are you passionate about? What are your values, your goals, and your beliefs? How do you identify yourself? Have you ever taken the time to answer these questions? If you haven't, you're not alone. It's not something we naturally do, especially once we get swept up in the fast pace of life after childhood. And asking deep questions about your identity can be tough, and it gets harder the older you get. But once you align who you are and how you are living, everything else becomes far easier, no matter what obstacles you face. In my own experience of this, I didn't see my military career as a hardship, even though I was working in extreme and unpredictable environments, because I was 100% committed to it, which made the tough times easy to get through. When I moved to London and took the consultancy job, I struggled far more with that. I knew it wasn't right for me, and that made everything a battle. Now, the physical actions like the cold water immersion and breath work helped me on the physiological level, but the mindset work unlocked the key with everything else. I realized my true passion was in health and fitness, and I began to work on that, which provided me with the commitment to move forward. And when you are committed, being resilient becomes much easier because you feel like you're on the right path. But don't mistake this for meaning that everything has to be rosy and going well, because that's not the case. In the process of building T&E, the business, my 5-year relationship ended. I left London and moved back home, which, don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly grateful for. But on the face of it, going from part of the most elite military force in the world, then to a well-paid consultancy job in London, to then working from my parents' dining room table, earning 400 quid a month and sharing a car that costs less than that with my business partner, it doesn't seem like a great place to be. But it didn't matter because I knew I was on the right path and I was committed to it. When you know something is right, a career, a relationship, a friendship, you can commit to it and weather any of the storms that come to pass. And that is the HALO system, a framework to eliminate stress and build resilience. As I said at the beginning, the reason that this is effective is because it works on both a physiological and a psychological level. If, for example, you only look to improve the physical element, then yes, you will offset the stress you are feeling. But unless you work on your mindset and become less susceptible to stress in the first place, you'll always be stuck in this stalemate. Ultimately, chronic stress is almost entirely down to our reaction to events, and that is completely within our control to change. On the other hand, if you try and tackle your mindset without taking action to calm your autonomic nervous system, to take your foot off the gas and let your body rebalance, then you will find it so much harder because you'll be in a state of low energy and brain fog. So it's essential that it's a dual approach. When you take that pressure off your body and everything can function as it should, the difference is night and day. Restoring that hormonal balance and building a serving mindset enables you to make the most of your potential and make the most of life. Underlying chronic stress is a huge roadblock that stands in most people's way, most of the time without even realizing it because of that fishbowl effect, and it's completely unnecessary. Now, the real challenge when it comes to making a positive change, knowing what to do is only half the battle. In fact, it might even be more like 15% of the battle. The other 85% is compliance, actually carrying out the actions on a consistent enough basis that you start to see the results. Now, if you can get an accountability partner or surround yourself with others on the same journey, that will help a great deal. And there's also one resource that I highly, highly recommend, and that is the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you take on board and practice the methods he teaches, it will make positive change far easier. And here's another really critical point. It's the small things that you do consistently that makes the big difference. It's really easy to take each small action, like putting your phone away an hour before bed or doing a few minutes of box breathing, and think that it's too small to make a difference. You slip into an all or nothing mindset and believe that meaningful change only comes from taking big action. And that is the best recipe to stay exactly where you are and never make a change, because it will never be the right time to do that one big thing. There will always be an excuse. This is another shot from our coaching group that sums it up perfectly. Moving forward, I'm continuing with all the elements and feel in a far better place overall than I did 30 days ago. Collectively, all the elements put together have been a real game changer for me and have opened my mind to a much more effective, productive way of life. And an idea that we hammer into the members of our community is that of having a positive moving average. You will have good days and you will have bad days. That is just life. But the worst thing you can do is get into an all or nothing mindset where you take no action unless things are perfect. Instead, simply remember that it is your moving average that counts. Keep showing up and look for the small wins each day. Do that, and I promise you will get to where you want to be. It's easy to think that there is one thing, one supplement, one program, one technique that holds the answer. But the sooner that you realize that it's about the small habits you perform consistently that hold the true power, the sooner you will get to where you want to be. Yes, it helps to have the right framework, but if you took just 2 or 3 of the principles I've spoken about today and diligently applied them, it will change your life. I sometimes feel it's ironic that Special Forces is called Special Forces because I don't think there's anything special about it. There's no one magical thing that we do that gives some kind of superpower. The reality is that those guys are just very, very good at the basics. They are consistent with the fundamentals. And I've seen the same thing across every single top performer I've ever met. And I include in that friends who do normal jobs and have fairly standard lives, but they are incredibly happy, which at the end of the day is all we are all looking for. And the common themes are that they know who they are. They are authentic with how they live their lives. they take responsibility for all of their actions and they don't worry about what is outside of their control. Small positive changes in the right direction is all it takes, one rung of the ladder at a time. And if I can get out of sharing mode, guys. Yeah. Turn this back on. And we're back in the room. And that is, 49, I hadn't actually timed that before, so just about perfect, Ross. I said it was going to be 50 minutes.
No.
So that was the talk, guys. So we can jump into now any questions that anyone's got. I see, all I can see is comments about bins at the moment on the chat.
Yeah, Ross, do you want to go first or me?
Is Ross gone again?
Yeah. So Simon, I've got a whole host of questions, but I'm
right. Okay, hit me with it.
These
we were ready. Go for it.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for that. I think I was nodding away at that and forgetting that the screen was actually on.
I thought you were going to say nodding off then, mate.
No, definitely not. No. So I think for me is, could you tell us about a time during like training or combat where you had, I'm assuming you've had a lot of these, but where you've had serious acute stress and how you've dealt with that? We've talked about chronic stress more, but I think everybody on the call would want to know, those, particularly watching things like SAS, Who Dares Wins, and kind of seeing all the training and,
I think the biggest thing with dealing with acute stress, so with one of the best ways to, I guess, explain it is, if you took it's training and preparation for those circumstances. If you took anyone and dumped them in, whoever it is, straight off the street, straight into combat, it's going to be game over. It's going to be acute stress straight away. But because you go through the continuous build-up period, and I guess it's all about you gradually exposing yourself to being uncomfortable and getting comfortable with that. So you're gradually pushing outside of your comfort zone, so that when things do happen, you can almost switch into a state and deal with it. And really what you want to, when those situations happen, when things are going wrong, the key is basically not panicking, remaining calm so that you can eliminate that tunnel vision. When acute stress happens, the adrenaline rush goes on in the body, you get that tunnel vision. And if you start to panic, you either are indecisive, you freeze and don't do anything, or you end up making bad decisions because you're basically not thinking in a calm manner. It's the same way if someone gets into trouble in water, drowning, for example, the worst thing they can do is panic. If you actually relax, we'll float for however long that we need to. So breath work is a big part of it. But I think, these are the things like that cold water immersion they talk about. It's a really simple activity, but it actually, so when people go through it in the group, the first few times they do it, they're hyperventilating, they're not thinking straight, they're basically, it's an uncomfortable experience. But just by gradually getting them to really concentrate on their breathing and actually tune into what is happening with their body, very quickly they become to, get quite calm with it. And that is the state that you're looking to get into. And I guess on the training side of things, sort of segueing into something a little bit different here, I guess, is it just made me think of the getting yourself into a state, I guess, a good zone for dealing with things. For example, and you can use cues to do this, I guess it's slightly off topic. For example, when you're going into jobs in Afghan, so it's usually to enemy compounds, the helicopter flight could be a couple of hours. So if you are on that flight and you're stressing out the entire time of, what might happen, what's going to happen, what if this happens, or whatever it is, you're going to be burnt out by the time you get there. But because you learn to just, and this comes to controlling the controllables, you don't need to worry about that now. All you're going to do, stick some music on or whatever, you've got your warm jacket on, you chill out, guys will go to sleep. And then when you're closer into target, you get a 10-minute call. So that's when you start to, start to come around, tune into what's going on. You're taking warm kit off. You get 5 minutes. Okay, you're starting to check kit now. You're starting to ramp up your body and that arousal state. 2 minutes from target, that is when you're really switched on. Final weapons check, you're moving to the end of the helicopter, you're down on one knee, and then 1 minute, that is all you're focused on. You're in the zone. You've done the training preparation, and that's it. You're ready to go. And you can do sort of simple things with your work. For me, when I put my headphones in, I've now linked that with being sort of focused and doing work. So blocking out all of the distractions, notifications and phones and stuff are turned out. My headphones go in, for that hour or whatever it is that I'm doing that work, then I can really zone in on do it. Bit of a segue there, but kind of linked in.
No, that's really cool, and thank you very much. And I've managed to get my camera on now, so I apologise for the haircut. But
hey,
but yeah,
the moustache is worse than the haircut.
Yeah. It's great to see nice insights, and I've had loads of questions come through, and one of them that I think will be particularly good is for somebody who's like, they've come on now to this call, they listened to what you've said, they've maybe seen some of the stuff that I've talked about or you've talked about previously, and they're thinking, right, this is ground zero for me now. Where should I start? So if you were to say, look, if you were to take one of these things, what would it be, and how would you sort of get them to think about taking those first steps?
I think I'd sort of pick a simple one from each side. So like I said, it is important to have that dual approach of physiological and psychological. I'd pick whichever, here's the crux of it, pick whatever action you think you can do and start with it as small as you can, that you think it will be a no-brainer. Every single person on this call is different. It's different backgrounds, genetics, goals, lifestyles, all the rest of it. And perhaps each of us have watched that presentation and thought, oh yeah, I'm okay with that, but no, that, is really tough, or I'd find that really hard. Work out what you think is easiest for you that you can implement, and then go for it. That may be 5 minutes of box breathing. It may be, I think I can do the cold shower from that side of things, or make changes with, say, diet around gut health or sleep. So picking actions that are small enough that you think you can get started is really crucial. And the same goes on the mindset. If I was to pick two, breath work really does. It's one of those things where it's easy to dismiss, that you just think is not worth what you're like, how can 5 minutes of breathing make a difference? And it, honestly, if you're consistent with it, it massively does. On the mindset side of things, I think either trying to always remember, or trying to let go of things that aren't out of your control, not getting wound up by things on the news or on the radio, or stuff that's happening. Although I think probably the first one that I'd say to start with, if you can, is really taking some time to reflect on who you really are and the life that you're living, and trying to get those in line. I do find that those, once you get that, it makes everything else easier. If you've got conflict or don't really understand who you are, you feel like you've lost your identity and sort of feel like you're drifting, like you have no purpose, it really does make everything else a battle. So I'd probably start with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've talked about, and lots of the people that have read some of my stuff or the stuff that we put out with Ascend is talking about having your actions in line with your values. And for some people, they've never really asked themselves those questions. So I think, like you say, maybe asking those questions for the first time might be a good place to start. That's really cool. I really like that. Someone else has asked, talking about, and you mentioned it there, is resiliency and having a resilient mind, is it all about consistency? And when we're talking about consistency, what specifically do you do to sort of get yourself going when you're having a tough day, or it's just a bit shit? What do you do specifically for yourself, just to kind of like, you've recognized something and then you do something to get yourself back into the play?
Taking awareness is a massive one. So when that's happening, I try and become aware of that fact, step back and be aware of it. Awareness is a huge component of mindset. It's it's the biggest thing, or one of the main things that we teach through our courses, is getting people to become aware of their own natures. We call it bound nature and free nature. So basically, you know, when you're in free nature, everything's good, and you can move forward and do stuff. And it actually also means that even if things aren't going well, you can still do actions to take you forward. So even when you're feeling shit, you can still get on with it, and move forward. Bound nature is that. And it manifests itself different for every person. It comes out different. You know, some people get angry, some people withdraw and become quiet. You know, some people get frustrated, mind racing, or for other people, it goes completely blank. So it's recognizing, it comes down to self-awareness of noticing your triggers when things are going wrong, and then be able to step back and acknowledge that, and just go, you know, okay, that's fine. Give myself a break. Right, what can I do? Small things, again, comes back to just take it back to small things that you can do right now. I think a lot of the time people get into those states and they get into this negative loop where they're like, oh, I'm feeling shit. Oh, why am I so shit? I can't do this, or I can't move forward. And you just get into a feedback loop where you're telling yourself that and you never move forward. It comes down to that again, like not being hard on yourself and blaming yourself or circumstances. Just take that step back. Breathing is a really useful one. You know, taking 5 minutes of breathing meditation. I use cold water sometimes. I've had those times where I'm feeling low or whatever, and I will literally go and dunk myself, you know, take 2 minutes, and you cannot fail to come out once you've had that, the physiological response in the body and that rush of endorphins, you can't fail to feel better. Getting out and going for a walk, I'll do that. Just removing yourself from that situation if possible, if you can, to break what is happening, and doing an activity that will upregulate your parasympathetic nervous system, breath work, a walk, a cup of tea, whatever it is that, you know, relaxes you and allows you to think in a clearer way. And again, like I said, break stuff down to the smaller actions. I think it's really common that we get psyched out or stressed out about all the stuff we have to do. We use along with other stuff that we teach, we use something called the Eisenhower box and the Ivy Lee method. And all it is really simple. I'm sure you've got similar for your mentorship groups, really simple productivity tools that allow you to get everything out of your head onto paper and just simply organize it so that you can break it down into logical steps. There's nothing magic there. It's just very simple actions.
That's really cool. Thank you for that. Just on the idea around the breathing, Emma's asked, is it, and you did mention it there about sometimes when you are feeling slightly stressed, you recognize it and then you use the methods, but do you also set a time out like every day to consistently practice the breath stuff?
So I usually do it in the morning. So I usually do the breath. So for me, I usually do a run or something if I'm doing exercise. Then I'll do the breath work and then the cold water immersion. But what I've also found with this stuff is, as you sort of get in tune with it or do it so that you understand the practice, I'll do it in little bits in a day. So I'll try and just trigger myself, like a little reminder if, I don't know, I'm doing some work or get up to leave or whatever it is. And I'll just check in and realize, like, oh, am I breathing deeply? I'll do it. So here's a good one. And it's sort of same with meditation. If you're waiting in a queue for, I don't know, whatever, the supermarket or something, naturally we all reach for our phones. We've got to be doing something, looking on it. But I use those times, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just do deep breathing, like meditate. You don't have to be sat cross-legged and thingy, but just letting your mind relax, just stop your brain racing and just taking what's going on. Just those small moments throughout the day, that's what makes the difference. But again, like, I'm not perfect with all this stuff. There are days when I don't do cold water, I don't do breath work, I don't do any exercise. It's the moving average. You don't have to have this perfect routine every day to see success. I think there was a question before that actually on Mark asked about, can you change from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? And yes, absolutely you can. The first stage is, again, awareness. It's understanding where you've got a fixed mindset, and that's probably actually a point to make. And it really is worth reading Carol Dweck's book. but you can have a fixed mindset in some areas and a growth mindset in others. So for myself, example, I've always been very good with a growth mindset in terms of career stuff or exercise, but I'd probably definitely had a fixed mindset in terms of relationships, as in, like, this is me, accept it, that's it, I'm not changing, this is who I am. And I've definitely taken action through my own mindset work to work on that. So it's not that you don't necessarily have a fixed mindset overall and a growth mindset. It can be different in different areas, and you can absolutely work on it.
So I've just had someone else has given us a question here. They said, looking back, and obviously reflection is hindsight's always 2020. But is there any moments where you can think back to, maybe it was moments, probably more likely when you were on operation, but where you had kind of a holy shit moment where, looking back, it should have been a scenario where you completely lost your shit, but actually you're able to sort of maintain it and sort of get a grip of yourself, but only looking back, you've kind of gone, wow, that was pretty mad. But
Yeah, I mean, actually, it probably wasn't on the one that springs into my mind straight away wasn't the military, but not operations. Funnily enough, it was actually I was in mountain troop in special forces, and it was on a climbing course, and we were down in Cornwall climbing, and we just started moving on to lead climbing. So if anyone not familiar with climbing, when you're doing trad lead climbing, you're basically climbing up and you place your own protection. So you're physically putting what is anchoring you to the rock in. And I was climbing up, I climbed up a corner, and then it was like a diagonal overhang, and I was putting what you call cams in, which they're spring loaded, and you squeeze them, put them under the rock, and they expand. So I was putting these in and moving up, and I was about a meter away from like a ledge, sort of a natural resting safe point, and I slipped. And as I was falling, I could hear they're all pinging out. So all the protection was placed, just going ping, ping, ping. But it's like, I don't know whether it's military training or what, but there was no like panic. It was just, well, this is happening, and something bad, something bad's going to happen here. And then my last one, the very first one I placed, but the last one that was pinging held, and I stopped. I smashed into the rock, and I probably stopped a foot above the ground. There was two women that were having their lunch there, just sort of out climbing, like screaming. And the ML, the mountain leader who was belaying me, was just ashen white. But actually, like the follower from that, he was like, do you want to stop or do you want to carry on? And I knew, like, I did have, after like the adrenaline full on shakes, I was like, no, let's just do it, because if I don't get back on and do it. And that was probably one of the most exhausting, like physically, by the time I got to the top. So I took another fall further up, only a small one. But by the time I got to the top of that rock, I was so drained. But I think through practice, you do just get to the point, and the military, because it is through training and you've constantly been taken out of your comfort zone, and just understanding that really all you can control is yourself and your attitude. You get to the point where you are just calm. Guys, when stuff's happening, people are being shot, or whatever it is, bad things are happening, there's no panic. Guys just dealing with it. You just go into a mode and you just deal with what has to be done, because it's those decisions that make the difference as to how well the outcome's going to be. And like later on, yes, it's probably the time when you go back and process stuff. And if you don't process it, that can obviously lead to the traumatic events afterwards. So it's just really coming back to that fact that all you have control over is your perception, your attitude, and how you react to events. It's not a good thing to bring up in an argument with your partner, because I've done it before. But when someone's getting angry or stuff, and you come back with where it's like, I'm not making you angry, you're making yourself. Which is, it's truth, but it's quite hard, and it's not the time to do it. But it's the same. The comedian tells a joke, and half the room laughs and half doesn't. It's just perception. The joke's the same. The event is the same. No one can make us feel anything except what we make ourselves feel, which is really easy to say. And there is, you don't get to a point where you're perfect with that. There's no way that I don't get to the point where I still get frustrated or angry or that stuff. But you just get better. If you can really embrace that thought, you become more aware of, I guess, your emotions, and can become better through practice, and it is practice at not being so reactive to things.
So we've just had a question come in, and it's not more of a question. I guess it's probably something we can all relate to. And it says, completely agree with everything that you're saying. However, I find actually accepting it's a shitty day and allowing myself to have a day off feels like I'm feeling a bit sorry for myself. It's okay, and tomorrow I'll be back on track. Do you think it's okay to do this, or do you always pull yourself out of it?
No, I think it's absolutely okay. You know, I think times, and it's the same with food and stuff. I think the worst thing you can do, and obviously there's a difference. If every day is like that, then you need to make a change. But you know, if general, you know, things are good and you have one of those days, then just accept it and just, you know, always enjoy it. Like, you know, it's not working, I'm just going to go and relax. You know, it's the same. We often see it when we talk about nutrition with people. You know, if you're having a bad day with food, then at least enjoy it while you're eating it. The worst thing you can do is eat the crap food and then not enjoy it and feel guilty and be hard on yourself at the same time. So it's like a double loss. So I think, you know, it's just society. We get to this point where, you know, we're always shown images where people are, you know, go hard, always doing the, you know, got to be on it all the time, and it's just not reality. I don't know anyone that functions like that. It just doesn't exist. I think the better you can become at being easier on yourself, and just understanding that everyone has those days, you know, it's important.
So, yeah, we've got a few questions on there as well. I've just had one come in, which is a bit unique to this kind of scenario. And this person's asking, they're actually looking at commencing Royal Marine training this year. And they want to know, for you looking back, what sort of advice would you give yourself to kind of create? And she's already started to get the terminology right, but they want to know about creating a nails mindset. But looking back, when you went through training, what advice would you have given yourself?
One, just take it a day at a time. Don't focus in on, and it's sometimes even, you know, like an hour at a time, depending on what's happening. So don't worry about the full process. And that was the same through Royal Marines training, selection. If you looked at the full time, it just becomes so overwhelming. Just break it down to one part at a time. And then I think it does just come down to putting 100%. That is what the training team was looking for. Just put 100% effort into whatever you do. Doesn't matter. This, again, I guess, comes to growth mindset. It doesn't necessarily matter. You know, you can improve the outcome, the performance. It's the behavior, your sort of attitude that's more important. And if you want, I guess the nails mindset side comes down to, again, the same as selection. It's like, just embed. If that is what really means, you know, you're really committed to it, and that is what you want, as long as you've got that firm commitment and you're doing it for the right reasons, you're not doing it because of how you'll look to other people if you pass, or, you know, money side or any of those things, they're not strong enough to get you through hard times. You have to be doing it because that is what that's who you see yourself as. And that's what you want to become. And as long as you've got that firmly embedded, then you'll get through it.
That's brilliant. Another few questions here. This is coming from a few different people, actually, talking about alcohol. So
yeah,
I'll
talk about two here, and I'll talk about coffee, the one that always brings up the biggest kickback. Alcohol, I don't really drink now, and it's not massively due to any health things. Like, I'll occasionally have red wine and stuff. I just kind of got over it. I think for me it was almost easier. Like, even when I was younger, I never drank because of the taste of it. I've never been someone who's like, oh, I really fancy a beer. I basically just drank to get pissed when you were going out. It affects, so alcohol, it indirectly will affect your stress levels, purely because it affects your sleep, so preventing you getting into deep sleep, and also because it has a depressive effect. That's the one thing that I do notice. If there's a wedding, whatever, and I do have a boozy night, my mood, my head, honestly, it probably takes me 4 or 5 days to get back on. It has such a negative effect, like the classic booze blues. So that's, the one thing I'll be aware of, I think, with this kind of stuff, it's, you have to balance out what makes you happy versus the health side of things. I always say, I think if you took one person that, maybe they don't eat the best diet, but it's all right. They have a drink, glasses of wine or beer, whatever it is here and there. They do enough exercise and keep mobile, but they're not super fit. But they're really happy. I guarantee they'll live longer and a better life than someone who is like, hammering their body with CrossFit 7 days a week, like stressed out with a job that's, perceived as successful working, whatever it is. They're probably far likely to come down, end up in the ground before that person probably won't have as a happy life. So, which again comes down to working out, what makes you happy, not what society or what other people think, what, makes you truly happy and doing the things that you enjoy. The one thing I will say, so stimulants for stress levels, again, putting it in context, if you love coffee or tea and you're having like, 1 or 2 good cups of coffee in the morning and you're sort of finishing before midday, it's probably not a big problem. We always get people on our 30-day challenge to cut stimulants for 30 days because it's 30 days out of your life. Do it, see how your body reacts, and then if you want to put it back in afterwards. And honestly, the headaches people get, which should tell you everything you need to know about it. Because I think, look, what people don't understand, if I was to say to you now, Ross, why do you feel like, what does coffee give you? Why do you feel pepped up afterwards?
Well, I would have used to have said that it was because of the stimulant in it. It's interesting. Jonathan and I had this conversation because we've been talking about it recently, actually. Before it became just it was a habit that I started doing. And I almost had to make a bigger deal out of the coffee making process just to cut down. If it was on tap, I'd just find myself going there and you're almost seeking out the perceived stimulus.
Well, I think what it is, most people put it down to, they're like, it gives me energy. So people think coffee gives them energy because it allows, to work longer, whatever it is. Coffee is stress. So there's no calorie substrate in coffee. So it's impossible for energy. What coffee does, or caffeine does, to be more precise, is it suppresses your adenosine receptors in your brain. And your adenosine receptors are basically there for relaxation and sleep and stuff. So basically you are drinking a cup of stress that is telling your body to go artificially into fight or flight. It's like something is happening and you need to react. And that is why you're wired and have that effect. So if you're doing that constantly throughout the day, you're just hammering your adrenal glands and your stress response bodily, basically. So if you're already feeling stressed through whatever, all you're doing is drinking extra stress. So again, if you're having one or 2 in the morning, it's probably not a big deal. But like we were having people, come to us drinking like 5 or 6 cups a day and throughout the day. And you will see it we always recommend like gradually reduce it if you're going to come off. People do go cold turkey, but 9 people out of 10, when they do it, they get horrendous headaches. And again, that should tell you everything that you need to know about the substance. So I'll occasionally have a decaf, but I'll occasionally have a proper coffee, but generally I just have a decaf, like a nice decaf in the mornings.
So somebody's talking about, and I know sleep's a big component that you talk about, you're a big advocate of the sort of approach to sleep. Someone's asked here, they've been training 5 days a week, working on getting 7 hours a night. Should I up my workouts to 7 days, or is it better to rest the body?
I mean, that is one where, without sounding flippant, it's like, what are your goals? Why, do you need to, what are you trying to achieve? I would say a couple of things with that is one, sleep is incredibly important. And I know that some people have night shifts and things and it is hard, but the more you can get it on point, it really is crucial. One thing with that, we do have people that we coach that do have night shifts. If you can't get your 7 hours plus in a night, then like having a nap in the day is perfectly fine. If that, you need to do that to make it work. Just to cover one thing, because you always get it on sort of sleep. And I would, even if you don't read Matthew Walker's book, go and listen to any of his podcast interviews, and it will both terrify you and really get you to understand how critical sleep is. But his stat on, so the percentage of the population that can survive regularly on less than 6 hours sleep a night, rounded up to a whole number, is 0. So, you know, anyone out there that's like, oh, you know, I feel I can function on that, the data and the links to degenerative illness later in life is pretty clear. It's not good for you. And with the training generally, I think another thing, you know, we get hammered all the time with people that are like, you see all these images, it's like, go hard, you've got to work out hard all the time. There is no elite athlete that trains like that. CrossFit's a great example. And, you know, I love CrossFit. I did it throughout the military. CrossFit athletes do not train how people train in a box. Most people are stuck in a middle ground where they go at this intensity where they think they're going really hard in their workouts, but because they're doing it regularly, they're not really. They're in this middle ground. Because if you go for a session where you are truly going hard, you should not be able to work out for the next couple of days. So most people don't work out easy enough on their easy workouts or hard enough on their hard ones. I'd probably do a workout where I'd say, you know, really balls out once every 7 days max, usually 10 days. The rest of the time it's 80% or below. There's a good talk to listen to, a guy named, I think it's Zabib, something Zabib. He's a very famous MMA trainer, and his whole philosophy with his, and he trains, you know, a lot of top level athletes. He's like, my athletes should never ache the next day. They should never have DOMS, because what that means is they can train every single day, and over the course of a year they will get far more hours in than the athletes that kill themselves and then have DOMS and can't train for a few days. Ross Edgley's book, I think it's called the Big Book of Fitness, or Biggest Book of Fitness, is a really good book just to give the basics of training. So that's definitely worth a read.
We also had someone ask this question as well, and it's, how do you approach challenging tasks? And they're not just challenging, but tasks that you maybe fear?
So, yeah, that's a good question. Again, it probably comes down to, if it's tasks you fear, I guess it comes down to really trying to identify what exactly it is about that you fear, and then coming up with a plan to mitigate that. And whether, you see, I don't know what exact example it is here, but if it does involve something that is way outside of your comfort zone, see, I don't know whether this is work, or I don't know, take the example, maybe it's something like open water swimming that someone wants to do, and, you know, they've got the fear of doing that. The trick, I think, with getting outside of your comfort zone to get to a place you want to be is doing it in a controlled situation where you can do it enough so that it stretches you, but not so far that it becomes a bad experience that makes you not want to do it again. You know, that's all really the military is. It's like I said, if you got dropped at day one into some horrendous sort of firefight scenario, then it's probably going to give you such a traumatic experience that's going to be detrimental. You get incrementally exposed to I guess the different stresses or challenges that you do, so that you become more and more at ease with it. And that's probably the trick with that. So I think challenging tasks, generally, it really is just breaking it down. That is all I do with my stuff, is use the simple like planning tools or whatever it is. Or if it's physically, you know, workouts, for example, if I'm doing a hard session, so there's a few hard rowing ones that I'll do, I will literally look, you know, say it's a 500 meter, say it's 8 times 500 meters as hard as you can. I won't just break it down to look at the first 500 meters that I'm doing. I'll break it down from, once I start the row, I know that as I get into it, the first 100 meters will go quickly, so I'll concentrate on that. The next thing I'll look to is getting to 250. So no, okay, right, I've broken the back of it. Now I'm underneath. Like, I'll literally break it down to the few steps in front of me. And that's probably the same with, you know, if people are finding workouts a challenge, they're not, what I'm going to say is they're not motivated to go and do them. We rely on motivation and willpower far too much. Systems and processes and habits are far better. So simple things like have the workout planned ahead so that you're not at the end of the day having to have decision fatigue, working out what you want to do. So you know exactly what you're going to do, and your kit is ready so that you can go into autopilot, not have to think about the workout. All you need to do is put your kit on. And then all I think about is the warm up, because once you've done 5 minutes of like jogging or skipping or whatever it is, something that's actually easy and not taxing, the blood's flowing, you're in a completely different mental state then anyway, and it will then make the more challenging stuff easier. So break everything down and just focus on the 5 minutes in front of you is a good tip.
So like I've just told the group kind of like, we're going to look to sort of finish in the next 10 minutes, very mindful of everyone's time. Some really, really great questions. If we'll do a couple more, but if we don't get to answer all these questions, what I'll do is I'll make sure Simon gets a chance to look at them, and with the email we'll send out with this record, we'll make sure these questions are answered. But looking at some of the questions that have come in there, one that's quite interesting, I think a lot of people here will be able to link closely to, is if you've been sort of starting these techniques to help you de-stress, but then you've had a moment where you've got stressed and you were unable to use those skills that you've been practicing. When you go back to them, do you start back at the beginning, or do you kind of pick up where you left off?
It depends on you. Go back to the point where you think you're getting the benefit from. So we will have people, so the 30-day challenge, for example, people will go back and redo week 2 twice. If they get to the end of it and they've had a bad week or whatever, then fine, go back and do that stuff. The biggest thing to remember is that you never win at this stuff. You're not going to win at health and fitness. You're not going to win at resilience. You're not going to do an 8-week course or whatever it is and then be fit and healthy and that's it. You don't need to worry about it again. You have to do it for your entire life. And that means you have to find a way that works with you and your lifestyle. If you try and force things in that you just don't fit with how you do it or how you live, that in itself will be stressful because you're trying to force it in, and it will never be sustainable. So everything, I've talked about here and in general with a lot of health and fitness stuff, it's a framework and they're tools. You have to have some degree of self-experimentation to make it work for you. Like how I do stuff isn't going to be how Ross does it, how Jono does it, how everyone else. Not exactly, because we've all got different stuff going on. So working out what works for you and what you can do over the long term is really, really key. And just remembering, like I said, that you don't win at it. And we all, like I'm still, my mindset stuff, I use Tom Foxley. I'll do coaching with him. You're always learning with this stuff. You always see new stuff. You're always going back and relearning stuff. It's not a sort of once and done process. It's always evolving.
I think that ties quite nicely into this question. We'll wrap it up on this one here. This person's asking about coping with the fear of the unknown. So I'm guessing with the current sort of situation that we're in, how do you cope with that kind of fear of the unknown? What's coming down the line? And I know you've just touched on a few bits there, but is there anything you'd like to maybe add to that?
I think it's coming down to that. If you can, when you're comfortable with yourself, when you have, I guess, which comes with it, that self-confidence, it doesn't matter what's coming, because as long as you sort of are happy with who you are and how you're sort of living and moving forward, then you'll deal with it. It serves no purpose and doesn't help you to worry about that stuff to come. And again, it's easy to say, but it's the culmination of all of those things I talked about: controlling the controllables, knowing yourself, being committed, accepting challenge and not seeing it as a sort of direct reflection of yourself. That helps you get through that. With COVID going on at the moment, we're all in the same situation. And so the next remark I'll say, I've been through it with Tom Foxley stuff. And I think when you're not in that space, it can sort of sound I don't know whether flippant or disingenuous, but life is just a game. That's all it is. We're all here just playing a big game. And stuff happens, it goes bad, it goes wrong. But the more you can just sort of get on board with that and just enjoy the process, enjoy the ride, the easier it is. One of my favorite documentaries is a guy named, it's called McConkey. It's about a guy named Shane McConkey, who's a famous extreme athlete. But the biggest thing you take away from it is, he does incredibly dangerous stuff all the time, but he's so happy. I just watched his documentary. I'm like, that is a guy who's authentic. He just lives completely authentically, does not care about artificial stuff around success or, societal stuff we have. Just lives his life on his terms. And it's like I said, that can mean anything. There's friends that you'd say live quite normal lives, but are just incredibly happy because they've got to that point where they just know who they are and just take each day as it comes. And that's not to say that you don't have goals or things that you want to achieve, but it's the process. I guess it comes down to not putting, is a really key point, is embracing the process and not getting wrapped up in external events. Like, have the goals and have a direction. That's really important, and a vision of where you want to be. But it's the process to get there that's important. The day I passed selection, and same with the Royal Marines, like, it's not an anticlimax, but you're like, okay, that's fine, that's sort of done. It's actually the process that's more enjoyable. And when you look back on it, that's the memories that you have, is going through those hard days in the jungle and it's shit, and the same in training. Like, that's actually the most enjoyable times. You look back at those times with friends, or the stuff that you went through. It is the process, it's the journey. It's not, when you get to that point, there's always going to be something else that you're going to look for. So the more you can learn to enjoy the day to day, and again, that comes down to aligning who you are with what you do, like, life just becomes enjoyable. It doesn't matter what's happening or what's going on. You just sort of get through it.
Right, that's brilliant. I think that's a really nice place to sort of finish it for tonight. On behalf of everyone at Ascend and everyone who's joined us, thank you very much, Simon, for sharing all that good stuff. If these guys want to find out a bit more about you, where can they find you? I mean, we're going to post some links and stuff in the email, but where can they go and find you straight away?
Yeah, probably just on Instagram's an easy one. If anyone's got any questions, then feel free to drop it through to simon@thenaturalEdge.com. But social media is probably the easiest with the stuff on there.
Right. Well, like I said, on behalf of everybody, cheers for that. That was lots to take away. I can imagine there'll be some questions coming out of the woodwork tonight and tomorrow. Everything's been recorded, so you'll get a recording of this. And like I said, any questions you've got, buzz them to myself or go and find Simon on social media. Guys, feel free to hang out for a couple of minutes and talk to each other on here. There's some great messages coming through on the comments box. But thank you very much to everybody who has tuned in tonight. Thank you, Simon, for sharing all that good stuff. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that you'll be sharing stuff with these guys. I've really enjoyed that tonight. Hopefully everyone who's tuned in has got some really good stuff to go away and work on. And extremely valuable. So a massive thanks, Simon.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, Ross. Jono. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Take it easy.